wisdom, the clarity, and the power to impact and benefit humankind. And so, with that, Your Honor, I want to thank the ancestors for being with this team. Also, before I get started, I wanted to thank Mr. Victor Valencia and the leaders and conveners of this assembly. I can't think of a more worthy cause, but to be working with the people who have to live with the consequences of my generation. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. So thank you very much for keep doing this work. And now I want to apologize because I was invited last year to represent Homes and Meals. And so if you were here last year, you might hear a couple stories that are familiar. But when we talk about who we are, where we come from, those stories don't change. And so I'll be saying a couple stories that were really relevant and important. Let's see if I can advance. I don't even know what my slides anymore. Okay. I'll get there. My name is Manuel Lars, and I am the Director of Development Operations for Homes and Meals Incorporated. We are an internationally recognized bond production organization that's headquartered here in Los Angeles. We are a $2 million program. We have about 17 staff, and we offer, in our mission, as you can see, our mission is to promote peace and reduce violence through collaboration and integrate and consistent impact communities in Los Angeles and their countries of origin by empowering new immigrant leaders to become advocates for justice and equality. A deeper analysis of who we are is that Homes and Meals for the last 25 years has been greatly responsible for reducing gang homicide rates by 75% in Los Angeles. This is quite an achievement for any program and we're going to get a little bit more into what that is, but here's the twist. In that process, we managed to save. I want to substantiate this in a bit. Save California from destruction, and we'll get more into what that means and how we did that, and how we continue to try to do that. We work in places like El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Mexico, Venezuela. We have programs and organizations and collaboratives and networks that have been to these countries over the last 25 years. We have, next slide, please. Our history began, actually, this is what's interesting about the politics of the United States for those who are international. This is what's really interesting about what's going on here in America. We began in 1996 in response to the Central American destabilization campaigns of the 80s. Ronald Reagan wanted to destabilize the governments of Central America to stop the communist expansion, the socialist expansion that was happening all over the world at the time. He went to Congress and asked for money to support the rebels and the insurgents that were stopping these moves from happening. The United States Congress said no. So he concocted a plan with General Lyman Oliver North and CIA to fund those rebel forces regardless. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that they used drug money to do it. I happen to know that that's probably factual because my family was in the drug business way back when, and they used to work with CIA folks. And so we know that was happening. In response, Ronald Reagan knew that someday this reality would happen, and he passed something called the Amnesty Program. The Amnesty Program allowed for people from Central America to come to the United States, right? And then he gave them amnesty. That was his way. Ronald Reagan was a man who tried to defend his sins, so to speak.
Say that again?
He tried to defend his sins for what he's done.
Oh.
So, and that's what we think was the motive behind him passing immigration reform and amnesty. But what happened was the folks that he destabilized that fled those countries, they ended up in parts of Los Angeles and other parts of the United States where there was a lot of gang involvement. And being new to this area, they became preyed upon. And in response, they formed gangs or joined the street gangs that were in the area. In my Salvatrucha, MS-13 was created, and then 18th Street was one of the gangs that was pushing on Central American refugees. Now, the parents of those families may have received amnesty, but a lot of the young people didn't. They didn't go through that process. So when they committed crimes, they got deported, which they sent these young people back to Central America, where at that time there was something called, there were death squads. The same rebel forces that took over those Central American countries would grab people that came off the planes, take them to a nearby field, and then execute them. They're called death squads. If you had tattoos, they would grab you, take you to a place and kill you. In response, the gang members that did get through that process established MS-13 and 18th Street as how gangs always do, for protection and to defend against disparate government treatment. That in itself led to a new wave of refugees and migration from Central America that we're dealing with now, that the United States government is trying to address now. So this is a cycle, right, that we hear and see being played out in the courts and in politics that really isn't a Central American problem. It was a United States problem. These are United States gangs that were exported to Central America that created more destabilization in those countries and are now creating an international conflict. This is the space that Homies Meals operates from. This is the space that we call immigration. And so to be able to have the kind of influence both locally and abroad over the last years has been a really remarkable feat. And I wanna, so just some background of who we are and why we're here at this event. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so here locally we have four major departments. We provide outreach, which includes homeless peace initiatives, ambassadors for peace, and crisis response for food distribution. We do advocacy, community support to incarcerated people, freedom and dignity, which is a way of working with prisoners that are gang members who are going to be deported to Central America. How do they return to Central America with dignity and not be caught up in the draconian acts of El Salvador or Guatemala or Honduras that are happening now. And then we also have a reentry program for folks that are coming in to our communities here. It has to do with pre-employment work maturity, entry level to subject matter expertise, project management training, mental health and fitness, youth development, central. Before I get into youth development, I wanted to recognize Freddy Toledo. He's actually the youth coordinator for our program, and because we're talking about youth empowerment today and what that means, I asked him to come today so he can do talk a little bit about the type of young people we're working with and what we have, the building blocks that we want to discuss. So before I start talking about something that I'm clearly have grown out of my age, I want to ask Fred to come up, and then I'll come back and talk to you a little bit more about what it means when we say, if you build it, the world will follow.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Freddie Guerrero. I'm with Homies Wheels. I'm the government's coordinator at Homies Wheels. And, we're going to speak about youth empowerment, right? And that looks like, especially living in the city of Los Angeles, which is one of the major cities. We have so many gangs, so many poverty, so many destruction, so many violence. In my community, 90% of my youth that I work with do not have a father figure. That's a huge number, 90%. That means out of every 10 children, only one has a father figure. And then we know that, based on statistics, that households with an absent father are most likely for that child to be able to go to prison. It's a high rate for him to go to prison, commit crime, and so on. So these are things that we are often faced with serving the greater Los Angeles. Manny spoke about, being incarcerated, joining gangs at a young age, and how that looks like. So also share a little bit about myself, who I am, to give you a vivid scope of the life that I had to endure at a very young age, living in Los Angeles. I grew up in the McCourt Park area, which we all know that it's not the best place for a child to be raised in, for a single parent, single mom to walk around late at night, knowing that the dangers, right? For kids to have to walk home from school and back home, watching, overdoses and people dying in the streets, like it has become so normalized, so normal for us to witness that, me growing up, I didn't have to see that. But as time progressed and things started changing, laws took effect, and so on, people that are lawmakers and advocate for change don't have to live with the consequences of you living in that community, right? You don't have to live there. You're outside looking in, right? You're not there. You don't face that. We have to endure this single thing. But I grew up in a single parent household. My father walked out of my life when I was a very young child. My mother was she was a single mom raising 3 children on her own, right? She had to work long hours. Like I had mentioned earlier, if you don't have a father figure in your house, you're most likely to go look for one and commit things that a normal child should have to commit. I went on looking for a father figure everywhere I went, in schools, neighborhood, and so on. I ended up joining the gang at the age of 13. But before that, I was a young child striving to be an artist. I still like to draw a lot. I was often chosen as the first individual to draw something for his school. And my drawings were often selected. I entered competitions and so on. But my mom was so hard on me that she stole that gift from me, that I ended up pursuing something else. Because again, there's no manual. And our children often have to deal with this at home, right? There's no manual to perfect parenting. So being a single mom, you have to often choose what's best for you, and often you leave your child's needs unattended. Because we all have choices to make every single day. What you might like might not interest me, and so on. But sometimes, we grow up and belief systems are instilled in us. And those belief systems might be good or might be bad, but we don't know because we're so vulnerable. We don't know what's good and bad, so we pick up on these things. I ended up joining the gang at the age of 13. I met Homies Wheels because my mother was trying to look for various ways to make sure that I don't follow that type of lifestyle and instead pursue something else in my life. I will always be very appreciative of Homies Wheels for being there for me at a very young age, providing me with different things that I like at home. The love, male figures in my life, internships, just the escape of the reality that I have to endure at home, violence, physical punishments, and so on, right? These are things that every single kid often endures. We come from both broken homes. Sometimes you might see somebody that's physically looking good, he's happy, but behind closed doors, he's probably living a lifestyle that you have no clue of. So that's why it's very important for us to like make positive change for our children. These are the next generation of youth that will take on these seats that you're in today. Sometimes we forget about the reality of life. We forget the reality of what it's like to be a child. And then we pursue these careers and we leave our children unattended, Our kids go through various things, gangs, violence, rape, and so on. I know that because I'm in this position and I get to hear these stories every single day of my life. Every single day I'm in the front lines, seeing somebody's life, seeing kids from committing suicide, seeing a young girl from not ever again experiencing rape, by an uncle and so on, right? All these things are very vivid for me, like we tend to pick up a book and, read a story, and all these stories are very graphic, but we in Manny get to face that every single day because these are the population that we serve and we work with. We truly want to make a positive change in every single person's life, including our children, because that's where it starts at. It starts from home, I ended up joining the gang. I didn't make the positive choices that I should have made because I have a father figure, so I ended up getting incarcerated at a very young age. But just imagine a young kid picking up a gun, putting it at someone else's face, and your mother having to witness that, right? I remember that memory like it was yesterday. But I just saw too many people throughout my journey as I was entering adulthood. I destroyed people's lives. I might have destroyed somebody's income, and for that person to provide some shoes for his family, I stole that. And I recognize that. Now, at this age, I recognize everything that I fill in and how can I make life better for the next generation of kids so they won't repeat that cycle. So what can I do? I could be a positive, figure, and kids that I serve every single day. I ended up being incarcerated at age 15 years old. I got released when I was 18 years old. There goes my childhood, right? When I speak to these kids, I know what it's like to be in their shoes because I not only lack a father, like 90% of the kids that we serve in my community, I didn't have the best mother, although we don't recognize all these bad experiences because we're children, we are always going to love our parents, no matter what. We see past all those bad memories, all those harsh punishments, and it is what it is, And that's why our kids often choose unhealthy relationships because they learn behavior at home, And they're getting incarcerated. I get released. I get reintroduced to Homies Unidos now as an adult, as I'm in the court system. I'm at the LA court in downtown. And Homies Unidos has a solid foundation, solid connection and partnership with the court system because most of our referrals get sent from the court system. These are individuals that are trying to get back to society and, do some community service hours at an agency that will give back to their communities. And that's where I came in, as they were scrolling on the list, Homies Unidos popped up, and I recall, working with Alex Sanchez, that's when, Homies Unidos was a very important pillar in my life, because now as an adult, I recall Homies Unidos, even though I was incarcerated for most of my youth. I'm an adult now, and I recall, Homies Unidos, I remember them, let me go back there, and let me see what I could do. And I go back there, and, going in there, I don't see myself as a community service worker. I feel like I'm an asset in every single place that you throw me in. And most of our children and most of our adults don't actually think that way. We often think we're not good enough, or what are they going to think about me? We set ourselves with barriers and limitations that stop our growth, right? But I'm a firm believer that, I'm an asset in every place that you throw me in. And I went in there with that mentality. As I seen some of my mentors and who are with me today, seeing them engage with these youngsters, right? before they even like destroy their lives, as they get older, right? We intervene right at the moment, from the moment that they walk into our office. We intervene, we provide them with services, whether it be a lending hand, a hug, a shoulder to cry on, and so on. We provide everything that they need. Every single children is different. They all have different necessities, and sometimes we throw them all into one place, and we feel that they all have the same needs. So going in there and seeing my mentors engage with these children, gave me something to look forward to. I always felt like my life didn't have a purpose. I felt like I wasn't destined to go anywhere besides the 5-block radius that surrounded me, the local park, the hood life, picking up a beer, and so on, right? That's what I was given. Not only was I told from my family, you're never gonna amount to anything, you're never a gang member. I was often told by the police department also. The police department also helped mold the individual that I was once upon a time, because when our police officers are not here to protect and to serve, protect and to serve means that you're looking for the best interest of every single person that you encounter. And if you encounter a little young boy walking home, and you assume because of his outfit, he's a gang member, and he keeps on hearing this over and over and over, year after year after year, then he's gonna start to believe that he's nothing else but a gang member, right? So we wanna break that cycle of instilling roles in every single child, instilling the role of you're nothing but a gang member, instilling the role of you're never gonna be nothing but a true mom, and so on, right? We need to break these things, these patterns, as those that really want the best interest for every single person globally, right? Globally, So then you start believing that, right? You start believing that. So when I say the police department had definitely a huge impact in my life, because instead of like picking up and taking me home, you'll pick me up and take me to a rival territory and leave me there. So the individuals were like, the opposite individuals from the rival territory were like, pick on me, and who knows what, right? So I would face this every single day of my life, growing up in the city of Los Angeles, where individuals that were supposed to protect me, I feared them, and I didn't trust them. There was nobody I could trust, not my family, not my mom, my friends, school officials, police officers. Who was I supposed to trust? Who was I going to go run to and solve all our problems to when there was nobody to run to, And I think that's the harsh reality of individuals in our communities, the children in our communities, that they no longer trust the adults in their lives, especially their parents, because they're so tough on them, they're so harsh on them, and you instill your belief systems, which again, there's no manual to perfection. There's no manual to perfection. You stumble, you fall, and you learn, and so on. And you learn to not repeat the same things that once hurt you. And you need more individuals that you can trust in your life, right? And I have nobody, but I recall, of course, some homes was always there for me. They were very much went through things that I went through. So former gang members, they didn't have the best relationship with their parents, and so on. So I went back, and now I knew that my life had purpose. I used to work at a fast food place, and I would bring my food to the homies and those just to feed the kids, because I knew that food insecurity is also a huge factor to why children don't even want to go home. Because parents are so busy to even like cook a meal. There's no money. Our parents are struggling financially. Household multiple children. So we understand the importance of not only housing, but food insecurity, and that's why we conduct our crisis response food distribution every single month to different communities, because we know that food is something that's vital for every single child and family in the greater Los Angeles and globally. Food is a form of love, and not everybody has access to food. It's very important, and I know I needed that home in my house. The nights that I went hungry were far too many. right? So I would feed the children using my resources that I had. And then just to see the children engage and be happy that he had like a little pizza and so on was very important. So I knew that, slowly but surely, my intentions, my vision towards the future, and my purpose were aligning. And today I'm here, as an adult, I am now 30 years old. I've been doing this work for 5 years. I've seen so many things, and I've helped so many individuals. I've saved parents from committing atrocious things that they're gonna be regretful of, right? I want to share a story of a young individual that I helped. This is one of the many stories that Homies News has helped change. And we form leaders. We definitely do. And I strongly believe that Homies News has helped me, shaped me, the individual that I am today, speaking on behalf of Homies News and being here with you all, sharing this space, speaking to you guys globally, for everyone that's watching this, one individual could make a huge difference. One individual could shape and help change 10 people, 20 people, hundreds of people. Because you, by changing one individual, that individual will definitely change other individuals. You start planting seeds. Sometimes we come into people's lives and we destroy that person. We leave them in a much worse place than we found them. But here at Homies News, we don't do that. We come into somebody's life and we leave them in a much better place than we found them. We only work with the most vulnerable, the most destroyed, the ones that have lost all hope. The ones that don't even look to living another day. And there's a story of young Martin. Martin came to me, through a referral. And Martin was going through so many things in his life. He was only 13 years old when I received him. And I was 13 when I got into the gang. And so did he. He ended up joining the gang because he lacked the love at home. His parents were divorced. They were always fighting. There were things that mother never expressed to her children, so she could show love the way a mother should, because of her own trauma, her own insecurities. As I started working with this family, I learned that they fled Colorado, where the mother was sexually abused by gang members. So she had a certain perception of people that were in gangs, I learned that she was also a victim of police brutality, and a police officer ended up stabbing her and tried to murder her. So they fled. Right. All these things she kept concealed from at least her children. But now you must know why now the house is a broken home and why there was the family separation, right? Because now the father cannot bear with this truth. So how can somebody that's damaged and going through their own personal traumas can try to show love to the children? It's nearly impossible, right? Especially if you don't have the proper guidance and individuals in your life to help you throughout this journey. Martin was a lost boy who had nobody to rely on. He would often cut himself, and we see this in our communities where sometimes we inflict damage on ourselves to try to suppress pain or think the pain, right? And these are just a few of the things that all our children in the United States go through and globally too, They go through so many things that sometimes they don't express to the adults in our lives. He goes on and he tries to attempt to commit suicide on various occasions, right? This was all told to me. I didn't know about this, so I intervened into his life. And I remember working with the family, and I told the mom, you know what, there has to come a day where you have to open up and express everything you've gone through to your child, because how can he know what you're going through if you don't allow him to know, because right now his thoughts are like, you don't love me, you hate me, how can I be a better son? So you feel like you're never good enough. And then you start projecting these certain emotions and habits and patterns onto the world. So you're never good enough for the world. I started working with him for like 2 years, and then all the way up to his 18th birthday. I got him when he was 13. 3 years after I started working with him, I believe a few days prior, on a certain day, my executive director, Alex Sanchez, lost his child, lost his son. And his son died in a car crash coming home. And you must know that, I don't know what it's like to lose a child, but I know that I don't think it's a very happy feeling, and they were going through so many things, so many emotions, and I remember a few days later, they called me that Martin tried to commit suicide by hanging himself on the ceiling, on the ceiling fan, right? And LAPD went to the house and they had to remove the door. So he won't be unattended and unsupervised by himself, So I advised mom to remove any type of medicines and any sharp objects and so on, because I no longer trusted Martin to be alone. We no longer trusted it as a community. We no longer trusted it for him to be alone. We wanted to save his life, and I was so disappointed at him. I was so disappointed, so angry. Not angry at him, but angry at the fact that he does not know how cherished he is, how valuable he is. He hasn't discovered that. I'm so disappointed because a few days later, my boss had lost his son. And he has no idea what a parent will go through if you were to actually pass away, right? I picked him up, and he had no idea where I was driving to. As I'm picking him up, he's on a passenger seat. And I'm not even looking at him. I'm filled with so many emotions. I'm so disappointed at him. I don't even want to look at him. And I'm driving, and it's quiet. And we're driving, to Bellflower. And a few moments before I picked up Martin, I called my boss. And I told him, hey, Alex, can I stop? Do you mind if I go to your house? Can I stop by real quick? And he's like, hey, man, you know what? Right now's not the proper time. Me and my wife are grieving. And he called me, his tone was a tone of, like, why are you calling me? Like, why? You shouldn't be calling me right now, And I told him, I'm sorry, Alex, but you know what? I feel like it is a proper time for me to go to your house because I just have a young boy that I'm working with and he just started to commit suicide. And I think that your wife and yourself, it will do you good to socialize with other people during this time of pain. Maybe you could save this little boy from thinking that his life is not worth anything. Let your wife talk to him. Maybe he needs a mother figure in his life, And then, he agreed. And I'm driving over there, and Martin has no idea what's about to unravel. I'm driving over there, and he's like, where are we going? And I'm like, Martin, you know what? I'm so disappointed at you. I'm so disappointed because you don't know how valuable your life is. You don't think your mother will cry, will weep over you if you were to pass away? Your life has meaning, has purpose. You just haven't discovered it yet. We're driving to Alex. Oh, Alex? Yeah. His son just died. His son just died and you're already thinking about dying? You're contemplating death. And he had no words to say. So we drove over there, and we're sitting there, and Martin is a young boy, wearing all black, with cuts all over his arms, and he has so much hair that's covering his face, and he has a hoodie on. Basically, he's telling the whole world, don't look at me. There's nothing here to look at. We're driving over there, he's sitting on the couch. Alex's wife is crying, and he's looking at, Alex is across Martin, and I'm next to Martin. And you know Alex, he's a chunky, brown dude, short complexion, and he's looking at Martin, and he's like, look at me when I'm talking to you, Martin. So Martin gets up, and he's looking at him. He moves his little hair sideways, but you still can't see his features. And then Alex is like, no, look at me when I'm talking to you. Stand up straight, like a man. So Martin, stands firm, straight, no longer push back. And he's like, look, I just lost my son. And you're already thinking about dying? Are you dumb? Like, don't you think your family will weep over you? Don't you think they'll cry? So we had a conversation with him, we talked to him, his wife talks to him, and that motherly love, Miko, like, don't think about that. Like, your mother will cry over you, your life matters. I just lost my only son, I don't want that for you. We saved him, from that day on, something about that moment changed Martin. It changed him forever, And it just takes one moment of your life, a few minutes of your time to change somebody's life, to actually hear somebody out and truly understand what they're going through and give them a positive reinforcement and feedback and assurance, that his life will be okay. From that day on, Martin has changed a lot. He's no longer that little kid that you see. He no longer wears dark colors. He has nice hair. He works out. He's athletic. He has a better relationship with his family. He understands the importance of passing down the torch and then he taking over and changing the world. All it takes is one individual to change the world. We all today have the power, the time, and the wisdom to change somebody's life. You change somebody's life, will change other people's lives too. It's a domino effect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I could feel all the social workers in the room cringe. It's a really tough story to listen to and probably violated a bunch of counseling rules. But this is the concept that we want to discuss next, is we build our reality at Homes Unidos, no matter with whatever materials in front of us. And my story is a little bit different, and I'm not going to go into it, but I'm like Freddie, I'm a third generation gang member from Santa Monica. My family is probably offended a lot of the stuff that you watch on television, which is why when I was a young man, I was working for a youth empowerment program, organizing young people on how to organize. I did a phone call from a guy from Venice. Venice was our enemy territory, and he said, "Hey, what you guys did the other day, you guys shot a pregnant woman, and the woman you shot was your neighborhood shot was 7 months pregnant or something." And it was in retaliation for a shooting that happened the week before, where 3 of my homegirls from my neighborhood were shot. And I said, well, what you guys did was no different. And he said, we got to sit down and we have to talk, because this thing of ours, this social order that we call, has been around since the 20s. It was invented to protect our communities from disparate government treatment, from abuse, from people coming into our communities and abusing people. This whole thing is broken down. Anyhow, those conversations led to one of the largest urban peace movements in the nation. And Homes Unidos, and the gentleman we were just discussing, Alex Sanchez, was one of the very first people involved with that network. When all this went down, California was a very different place. California was the middle of the early 90s. There was a governor by the name of Pete Wilson, and he had all these draconian ideas for California. he passed a bunch of laws targeting gang members, 3-strike laws, fueled something that we call the prison industrial complex, that was extremely expensive for the state of California. This is right after the Iron Curtain fell and America didn't have any communists to fight anymore. We didn't really have an enemy, so we turned on our own black and brown young people, made them public enemy number one. And that wasn't the reality that we wanted to live in anymore. So we started creating a new reality. We started organizing peace treaties all over Los Angeles. We started building networks across racial, economic statuses, regional statuses, communities, neighborhoods, gang territories, whatever you want to call them. And when we were doing this, we reached out to social workers and school officials and employment agencies, and we were like, we have peace. Now we want people we need support, we need jobs and stuff. And they were like, you guys are gang members, and nobody want to work with you. We only work with the at-risk. The social workers told us, oh, they're gang members, they got to go to probation school. And none of the employers wanted gang members to be employed by them. So we learned really quickly that we had to build our own world. And in that process, we didn't ask for permission. It's like he didn't ask permission from a counselor to get Martin home. He didn't. He kind of forced Alex to share his story, to be there for that young man that transitioned his life. It's like we went to the state of California, we forced them to support the world that we were creating. We explained to them and showed them time and time again that you guys could go ahead and keep building your prisons, but you're going to bankrupt the state. For what it took to send one person to prison for 1 year, we could send 8 people to UCLA, cover all their tuition. For every dollar that you spend on corrections, on these draconian laws, on housing young people in adult prisons, on 3-strike laws, you could be transforming California. And they didn't listen, but we kept building. California was at one time the 5th largest economy in the world. It dropped to the 9th. And we were so much in debt that California was almost a bankrupted state. Until some people started to listen and some people started to see what we were doing in the community. We were negotiating community benefit agreements that gave gang members priority employment in local governments. We were networking across counties, across the state, raising organizers and training young people not to ask for permission, but just to build it. And eventually the state of California and its representatives began to say, okay, we'll follow. And California turned itself around. And the young people that we had influence over began to run for office. And now we're, over the last 10 years or so, we've been systematically deconstructing everything that was put up in the 90s that was seen in California. And to this day, we still haven't asked for permission to do anything that we do. They come to us. The state comes to us. The county comes to us. Metro comes to us and say, how do we solve this problem? And we know most of the time, like, we don't know. We don't know. It's not even our problem to solve. You solve it. And I say that in jest because obviously we're going to do what we can, right? Because anytime we can alleviate misery, anytime we can reduce the opportunity to stop people from being humiliated, anytime we can address trauma, we're preventing violence. We function from the premise that all violence comes from feelings of humiliation, that are there from deeply seated embarrassment, abuse, traumatic experiences, usually in their early childhood, pre-adolescent childhood development. I say that because we see a lot of young people, right? We see a lot of youth activists rallying and demanding that government respond to them. And we're saying, okay, that's great, advocating for policy. Now that's great too. But it's not the only way to do it. You don't have to ask them for permission. Just build it. That's one of the reasons why we have a re-entry program that talks about project management. We're teaching our folks coming out of prisons and out of the immigration carceral system on how to become project managers so that they can build and be more competitive in their communities without ever asking to ask for permission. Can we do this? Can you do this for us? Can you act upon our vision? And we're saying it doesn't have to be that way. And we're proof. This man's proof. We're both comes from some very violent, we were some very violent people at one time. We were some very desperate and humiliated people at one time. And we found a way to move California from the brink of destruction to just last week, we discovered we're the fourth largest economy in the world. And it all began with peace. It all began with the reality that we wanted to live. If you go ahead and go back, that's what I want to end up. If you build it, the road will follow. And so I want to thank you for your time. We have about 5 minutes to answer any questions. If there's any questions online or anyone, go ahead, yes.
Thank you so much. So hi, my name is Marcela and I come from Honduras. So I really appreciate all of the work you've done. I really know what it's like to have a country deeply affected by gangs and their violence. However, seeing everything that's going on in El Salvador recently, many people have their different opinions on that. However, my personal opinion is that mass incarceration is not any type of solution to this problem. However, I'd like to know, in your expertise and your years of experience dealing with gangs and gang members, what do you think is a really strategic action, or maybe what's a step that governments can take to really target the root causes that's causing gangs to operate at such a greater scale? What would you think is really a deep solution to the problem?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question, and that's a whole master's degree. But let me go ahead and just say this. This is Bukele, right? The president of El Salvador. He's a fool. Because if he was really smart, he would sue the United States. These are American gangs that you exported to our country. And the savagery that's been unleashed on us is the responsibility of the United States. They don't have to here, give me some money and I'll put some prisoners in my prison. No, they would take it to the international court and say, you're responsible. You deported your gang problems to El Salvador, to Honduras, to Guatemala, to all the Central American countries. It was your neglect, your humiliation, your lack of humanity, your lack of empathy that brought these problems to our people. That's what you should be saying. And now, I didn't say this in this, but I went to law school so I could understand these things. And there is total, standing all across the board, the injury that our American gangs has evoked on those countries is absolutely bonkers, and no one's done anything about it. we don't think, okay, so that's that component. I don't like to use the word gang, the next part of the question. I use street social order, right? The gang terminology has become this fabrication. There's nothing legal about being a gang member. We're all gang members. You know what I mean? Now, crime is, you go to prison and you commit crime. We're not committing crime. We're not doing anything bad. Our social orders in the street, like I said a couple times, were in response to disparate government treatment, abuse, discrimination, and outright abuse, right? Those how we respond, and now we use those social orders to amplify our political voice and to continue to protect ourselves from aggressive forces, whether they're other gangs or law enforcement or government, right? So the concept isn't really about gangs, it's about violence. And we think that all violence comes from humiliation. You want your people not to be violent, then give them a dignified way to live. Okay, we have 5 minutes. Is there another question?
Hi, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And I think what the stories and the anecdotes that you have mentioned have just reminded me of this book that we were studying in class called Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. And it was talking also a lot about youth incarceration, specifically in Alabama, but that just reflects a lot on how this problem in the justice system and also in government structure is everywhere in not only the States but also around the world, and it's impacting youth specifically. And we know that trauma can really last for a lifetime if it's improperly addressed. So my question is how, because issues like this are happening in today's society constantly, so how long do you think will it take for us to completely be able to find a solution that will deeply overcome this problem? And also, as social workers, how are we able to properly address long-term trauma for example, people who are involved in gangs when they were little, but that trauma lasts for a lifetime? How do we properly address that? Thank you.
Okay. So you're going, just kind of sticking with the theme of this, you don't ask for permission. You just do it. You didn't ask for permission to say that in a man's life, you just did it. And I think we get, unfortunately, when we become professionals, we get put in this little box. Right? We forget that the solutions that we want they live within us. We just have to learn to act upon it. There are consequences. We talked about Alex Sanchez. He was arrested several times by the FBI on trumped-up charges just to get a point across. If you stand against us, then we'll come after you. In both those cases, he won. He's actually in the United States a very popular personality in regards to fighting off government intrusion. But to answer you, to be more direct, you have to, you know what the answer is. No one can tell you. You're a young person with new ideas. If you want, as an adult, if I want to give you a prescription on how to solve the problems, why the heck haven't I done it already? Those solutions live within you all as young people. We have the broad view, we haven't been put in the box. Act upon it. One more question? We have 2 minutes and I have to wrap up.
I can just ask. Thank you for being here. My name is Cheryl. I'm in the MSW program. And when I heard you say you didn't ask for permission, you wrote a bunch of policy. That's what needs to be done. That is real social work. It's not staying within the box, because these Eurocentric practices that got taught to us were never meant for the communities of color. Were never meant to solve Black and brown issues. So you did it in a way that fit the community, and that's what real social work is. So I really commend you for that, because just being in the program, I've seen performative work of like, I am a social worker, but I don't cross these boundaries. No, a real social worker will do what you did. So I really applaud you for that. So I just want to make that comment. And I think that's what we need to do as social workers, is do what's the right thing to do. When you say you have it within you. You think you have it within you, you know what's the right thing to do. So sometimes that includes breaking quote unquote policies that were never meant to protect the Black and brown communities. So.
Yeah, and I think especially in social work, like, Arena, there's a lot of, latitude and leverage that you all have. Like, there's all these different criteria. We're already, we want to bring on more social workers and we want to put up one foot in the box so that we can qualify for, this and that and funding that, these requirements. And so, I mean, there's a lot of different gradations to the work that we do. And, the same thing with project management. Building and constructing movements, building and construction institutions, building and constructing organizations and networks and economics. We don't need the government to do it for us. In fact, they'll come and ask us, that works pretty good. How can we do it? And literally, they knocked on my door several times. How do you guys do that? So if you build it, they will follow. If you build it, they will follow.
They set up these policies that don't work for the community, but however, come and ask you for help at the end of the day.
Well, it even gets worse. Sometimes they'll hear the idea, implement it wrong, and then come to the people that took the idea from to go and fix it. So, and that's just more evidence that if you build it, they will follow. And that goes across the world. Thank you very much. That's our time.
Thank you so much to Homies Unidos for the very educational and inspiring presentation. I definitely agree with the points on youth being able to forge that path, and that a lot of times we don't always fit into the roles assigned to us, and so it's important to build that for yourself and to be able to connect with your community in different ways. We also want to acknowledge that we know that there were a lot of hard topics that were spoken about and very important topics, and we have a member of our staff here to talk to you, so please give a hand for Christian.
Thank you all. I just want to first, before we move to the break, to kind of just ground us into the present moment, because again, sometimes internalizing and acknowledging some of the hard things that we're talking about can be really hard for our minds, but also we can feel it in our bodies too. So I just want us to take some time to take some deep breaths. So we're going to take 3 deep breaths, and before we do that, I also want to acknowledge that we actually do have a mental health crisis response team as part of our International Youth Conference. So if you're feeling dysregulated, if you're feeling within your body that maybe some of the things that we're talking about, maybe not only today, but maybe something that we've talked about within the last 4 days. If you're feeling dysregulated, or if you're feeling like some things that you want a space where you want to feel validated, talk to, you can just come to the registration, to the front desk registration, and then we can direct you to the person talking about it, just make sure that as well. So I invite you all to take deep breaths with me. So we'll hit the floor. Hold it. Exhale. Take another deep breath. Let's inhale. Exhale. And last time. Inhale. And exhale. All right, thank you all so much for participating and for listening this panel out. And yeah, we'll have a little break before we get to the next one.
Thank you so much, everyone. Our next workshop is going to be continuing with Dr. Siva on science and spirituality, rivals, allies, one and the same. So we will reconvene at 1:30.